Yeah, you can.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. Today's topic is cardiac output monitoring and goal-directed fluid therapy. Moderator Dr. Abhishek sir and presented by me. Let's talk about cardiac output. Cardiac output is the total blood flow generated by the each ventricular heart in 1 minute and in normal adult at rest ranges from 4 to 6.5 liters per minute. Cardiac output is equal to heart rate and stroke volume. So any factors which affects the heart rate or stroke volume, it also affects the cardiac output. From cardiac output, we can also measure the mean arterial pressure by cardiac output into systemic vascular resistance. Cardiac index is cardiac output per square meter body surface area. As it takes body surface area, cardiac index is a more accurate indicator of cardiac output. Its normal value is 3 liters per minute per meter square. The formula is cardiac output divided by body surface area. Let's see the
So why
factors
do we
which
want to
affecting the
take body
cardiac
surface area? Vandana, why did we want to take body surface area?
Sir, if the body surface area is taken, then the correct amount of cardiac output going to the particular organ or particular measurements can be measured, sir. Like it differs physically by weight.
And okay, anyone? Kanya, the mic is on. So we want to take, so it has to be individualized according to the body surface area, so that it is basically upon the body surface area, because it has to be individualized based upon the surface area of an individual, because a different patient can have a different habitus. Some patient can be thin and some can be obese. So to minimize that factor, we are using body surface area. Okay, go on.
The factors affecting heart rate are age. As age increases, vagal tone increases and heart rate decreases. Sex, heart rate more in females due to resting sympathetic tone is more. Body temperature, every 1 degree Fahrenheit rise, the heart rate increases by 10 beats per minute due to direct effect on SN node and vasodilatation causing fall in BP. Exogenous symptomatics, which increases the heart rate. Hypoxia increases the heart rate by stimulation of chemoreceptors, and increase in intracranial pressure causes decrease in heart rate. That is called as Cushing's reflex. Factors affecting the stroke volume. The factors which affects the stroke volume are preload, which is nothing but the initial length of the cardiac muscle before ventricular systole occurs. Afterload is the resistance to which a muscle will contract. Contractility is the intrinsic factor of the muscles, which is the work done by a cardiac muscles at any end diastolic length of the muscle fibers. The factors which influencing the preload are uh, the preload can be explained by the Frank-Starling's curve, which tells that the increase in initial length of myocardial fibers will increase the force of contraction of myocardium up to a particular length of the myocardial fibers. The factors which increases the initial length of myocardials, like increase in total blood volume, arterial contraction, increase in pumping action of skeletal muscles, increase venous tone, decrease in intrathoracic pressure during inspiration, will also increase the force of contraction, so increase in stroke volume, which result in increase in cardiac output. The decreased by total blood volume, increase in intrapericardial pressure in case of cardiac tamponade, decrease in ventricular compliance in case of MI infiltratory diseases, and body position in sitting and standing peripheral pulling of the blood occurs, so venous return will be decreased, and increase in intrathoracic pressure. Afterload
So
depends mainly on the
Frank-Starling
outlet
law
wall
is
resistance.
very important. You can be asked about Frank-Starling law in your exams also. Okay.
Afterload, it mainly depends upon aortic wall resistance and peripheral vascular resistance.
Vandana, can you show that curve again? Frank-Starling curve.
Yes,
What is that plateau where the curve is plateauing? What is the significance of that?
ma'am, this signifies that until a particular length of myocardial fibers length, there will be force of contraction. When this point reaches, even though if you increase the venous return or increase the length of the myocardial fibers, the contraction of the myocardium will not be increases. It will be same.
Yes, so this is important point, right?
Yes, ma'am.
To this much extent, the preload can be increased or the force of myocardial contraction can be increased. And after a certain time, there is a plateau. You can't increase it further by further increasing the volume. It is not like that you keep on giving volume and the cardiac output will keep on increasing. This is not going to
Yes,
happen. There is a
So
plateau, right?
yes, so
yes,
there
ma'am.
is
Yes,
a
Aditi.
limit to extension of the cardiac muscle fiber. It can extend
Yes,
up to only a limit. Okay.
yes.
Can I
Okay,
continue?
Vandana, we can continue.
Yes, ma'am. Next, contractility. As I told, it's an intrinsic factor of the muscle fiber. It depends on sympathetic tone, exogenous sympathomatics, and electrolyte imbalance. Uh, as you can see, the circulating catecholamines increases the myocardial contractility such that even if the initial length of myocardium is less, the force of contraction will be more. So the factors which increases the myocardial contractility, it will shift the Frank-Starling curves towards the left. So the factors which increases are circulating catecholamines, stimulation of sympathetic nerves to heart, force frequency relation. It's nothing but as frequency of heart stimulus increases, there will be increase in force of contraction. This occurs only up to 150 beats per stimulus per minute. Drugs like digitalis, glucagon, and caffeine and theophylline also increases by increasing the cyclic AMP. The factors which decreases are loss of myocardium, stimulation of parasympathetic nerves to heart, intrinsic myocardial depression like heart failure, hypoxia, hypercapnia, and acidosis have negative inotropic effects, and drugs like quinidine, procaine, and pagurates. These all things shift the Frank-Starling curves towards the right, which means even the initial length of myocardial fibers is more, the force of contraction will be less. This curve indicates the heart failure. Let's see why we should measure the cardiac output. The measurement of cardiac output provides a global assessment of circulation, and in combination with other hemodynamic measurements like heart rate, arterial blood pressure, central venous pressure, pulmonary artery pressure, and wedge pressures, it allows calculation of additional important circulatory variables such as systemic, pulmonary vascular resistance, and ventricular stroke work. In many critically ill patients, low cardiac output leads to significant morbidity and mortality. Clinical assessment cardiac output is often inaccurate. The newer techniques for cardiac output measurements are becoming less invasive, thus that might provide benefit to many patients without attendant risk of invasive monitoring. Indications. Cardiac output is mainly important in cardiac surgeries, non-cardiac surgery involving high-risk patients, and deranged cardiac function due to shock, like septic shock, hypovolemic shock, such that we can give the treatment early and prevent the further consequences. Methods of cardiac output monitoring includes clinical, invasive, minimally invasive, and non-invasive. In invasive, there is fixed method, thermodilation method, lithium thermodilation method, and dilution method. In minimally invasive, esophageal Doppler, non-invasive, bioimpedance and bioreactance method, partial carbon dioxide deep breathing method, and pulse counter analysis method. The pulse counter analysis method may be invasive, non-invasive, depending upon the device we use. Clinical. Clinically, cardiac output can be measured by considering the adequate end organ perfusion. In case of brain, if ischemia occurs, there will be confusion and altered sensorium. In case of kidney, there will be decreased urine output. In case of tissue, due to anaerobic metabolism, there will be increased serum lactate. And in case of skin, capillary refillability time will be less than more than 2 seconds. So, but this is not accurate because the confusion and altered sensorium can be occurred by many other causes like electrolyte imbalance or any brain pathology. As well as urine output can be affected by many drugs pathologies like obstruction of urinary tract by prostate enlargement or by stones, etc. And skin capillary refill time will be more than 2 seconds in cases of vascular diseases also. The BP correlates poorly, but a narrow pulse pressure might indicate decreased cardiac output. Let's talk about Fick's principle. The Fick's principle states that the amount of substance taken up by an organ or by the whole body per unit of time is equal to arteriovenous concentration difference times blood flow to the organ. That is, the amount of tension taken per minute is equal to arteriovenous difference into blood flow. So by this, the blood flow per minute is equal to amount of substance taken per minute divided by AV difference of the substance. The Fick's principle is the basis of all indicator dilution methods of determining cardiac output. Let's talk about Fick's method. This is a conventional method. In this, the Fick's principle is applied to determine cardiac output by analyzing oxygen uptake from the lungs. This method requires pulmonary artery catheterization for mixed venous sample and arterial line for arterial oxygen content. But oxygen consumption can also be calculated from difference between oxygen content in inspired and expired days. Let's derive the formula by applying Fick's principle in in uh, in case of oxygen consumption. The Fick's principle is based on concept of conservation of mass such that the oxygen delivered from pulmonary venous blood is equal to total oxygen delivered to pulmonary capillaries to pulmonary artery and alveoli. As you can see, the content in the oxygen in pulmonary venous will be equal to the content in the oxygen in the pulmonary artery plus oxygen consumption, which will goes to alveoli. So the amount of oxygen delivered to pulmonary capillaries by the way of pulmonary artery is equal to total pulmonary arterial blood flow times the oxygen concentration in pulmonary arterial blood. So Q1 is equal to the blood flow into oxygen concentration in the pulmonary artery. So the amount of oxygen carried away from pulmonary venous blood is equal to total pulmonary venous flow times the oxygen concentration in pulmonary venous blood. So Q3 is equal to blood flow into oxygen concentration in the pulmonary venous. The pulmonary artery concentration is the mixed systemic venous oxygen, and the pulmonary venous oxygen concentration is the peripheral arterial oxygen concentration. The oxygen consumption is the amount of oxygen delivered to pulmonary capillaries from the alveoli. Hence, Q1 plus Q2 is equal to Q3. By this formula, we can get the equation that the oxygen consumption Q2 is equal to the blood flow into the difference between the venous and arterial concentration of oxygen. By this, the blood flow is equal to oxygen consumption divided by arteriovenous difference. By knowing the oxygen consumption and arteriovenous difference, we can calculate the cardiac output. The same formula which I wrote to understand. The cardiac output is equal to oxygen consumption divided by arteriovenous content difference.
So all Vandana, all these
sir.
principles are based on the principle of Fick's method, okay, which is
Sir.
basically depend on law of conservation of mass.
Of
Okay,
sir. Sir.
so hope everyone have understood the Fick's principle, because all this derivation are based on the Fick's principle only.
It can be asked in the exam. It is very, very important.
If anyone have any doubt, please ask.
Or we should ask question.
Yes, Abhishek, you can ask from the audience anyone, or you can put up the question, and if anyone volunteers, and they can answer.
Okay, can anyone tell us about the Fick's principle once again? Yes, Amer. Amer, are you there?
Amir? Okay, Amir is not there.
Anyone who can tell us
Amir will be
about Fick's
marked
principle?
absent.
Yeah,
Amir
yeah.
will be marked absent for today.
Hello. Hello, sir. Good afternoon. So, Varun here.
Varun.
Hi.
Okay, Varun, tell us.
So, Fick's principle is based on the law of conservation of mass. So that means the
Okay.
oxygen delivered from the pulmonary venous blood is equal to the total oxygen delivered through pulmonary artery.
And how are we measuring the cardiac output?
So first we are doing a pulmonary artery catheterization, and and another we doing as a arterial catheterization, and we are so calculating doing ABGs, and so calculating the difference amount of oxygen, sir.
Okay. Anyone else who can make us understand?
Hello, sir. Good afternoon, sir. I'm Satish.
Yeah, Satish.
Sir. Sir, by law of conservation of mass, oxygen delivered, through the pulmonary venous blood is equal to oxygen delivered to the pulmonary capillaries through pulmonary arterial blood and alveoli, sir. So we are
Okay.
taking pulmonary arterial blood as Q1 and alveoli as Q2. Then oxygen delivered from pulmonary venous blood as Q3, sir. Hello.
Okay. Okay.
So
So
Q1 plus Q2 is equal to Q3, sir. So that is
okay.
law of conservation of mass.
Okay.
Sir.
So oxygen
So
consumption is
Q2
equal to
calculating by oxygen.
yeah.
Sir.
Go on.
So
Go on.
Q1 plus Q2 is equal to Q3, sir, according to law of conservation of mass. So
Okay.
Q2 we are calculating by oxygen difference between inspired and expired air, sir. So oxygen difference between these two will give the oxygen in the alveoli, sir.
Okay.
So that is Q2. So Q1 we are in the 1 minute. So Q1 is oxygen delivered to the pulmonary capillaries through the pulmonary. So that is we calculate by Q, that is blood flow into pulmonary arterial oxygen content, sir.
Okay.
So pulmonary arterial oxygen content is calculated by a catheter, sir, by invasive technique.
Okay.
Then Q3 is that is blood flow pulmonary veins into arterial oxygen content of the any arteries, peripheral arteries that we are taking by ABG, sir.
Okay.
So by the formula Q1 plus Q2 is equal to Q3. So so according to this, Q1 is Q into pulmonary arterial oxygen content plus Q2 is equal to
Yeah, go on.
that is Q into pulmonary venous arterial oxygen content, sir.
Okay.
So according to this, we can calculate the cardiac output by Q2 by oxygen difference between the two we have measured, no, sir, from pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein. So like pulmonary vein minus pulmonary venous minus pulmonary arterial oxygen content, sir. So Q2 is oxygen consumption, that is measured by the alveolar oxygen, measured by difference between the inspired and expired oxygen content, sir, divided by pulmonary venous oxygen content minus pulmonary arterial oxygen content, sir. That
Okay.
from that we can derive the cardiac output.
Okay. Okay. Go on. Thank you. Go on,
The
Vandana.
sir.
Yeah, go on. Go on.
Okay, Vandana, you can carry on.
Continue, Vandana.
Monitoring. It is a gold standard for measuring cardiac output because of its ease of implementation and the long clinical experience with its use in various settings. It is a variant of the indicator dilution technique. It is based on conservation of heat, the first law of thermodynamics. Before the procedure, let's understand the parts of the pulmonary arterial catheter. It is 110 centimeters total length. In that, it has 4 ports. One port is for balloon inflation, which helps in going of the PAC into the pulmonary artery. And second port is distal lumen port, which will be open in the pulmonary artery, so it helps in measuring of the pulmonary arterial pressure. And the proximal lumen, it will be present in right atrium, so it helps in the measurement of CVP. And the thermistor port, which helps in the temperature monitoring. The procedure of the thermodilation. A known volume of room temperature fluid is injected as a bolus into the proximal right atrium lumen of the PAC, and the resulting change in the pulmonary artery blood temperature is recorded by the thermistor at the catheter tube. In adults, an inject volume of 10 ml should be used, while in children, an inject volume of 0.15 ml per kg is recommended. It is important to have a real-time display of thermodilation curve resulting from each cardiac output measurement. This allows the clinician to discern the artifact that would invalidate a cardiac output measurement, such as unstable blood temperature, recirculation, or incomplete indicator injection. Let's see the procedure. From the port, we inject 10 ml of the cold or the normal room temperature inject. It will come into the right atrium, and in right ventricle it mixes with our blood, and the change in temperature can be is measured in the by thermistor in the pulmonary artery. The curve which is obtained by this is the pulmonary artery thermodilation curve. In this, the curve will never touch the baseline. This is due to recirculation of the indicator. For the accurate measurement of cardiac output, we will do the extrapolation of the curve. The Stewart-Hamilton equation. This is the equation which we use to measure the cardiac output by use of the pulmonary thermodilation curve. Here, cardiac output is equal to volume of inject into blood and inject temperature difference into K1, that is density factor, which is nothing but the specific gravity and specific heat of inject divided by specific gravity and specific heat of the blood. And K2, the computation constant, taking into account the catheter dead space and the heat exchange in the transit. And the denominator, which is the change in temperature of the blood by time, is given by the area under the curve. The degree of temperature change is inversely proportional to the cardiac output. The temperature change is minimal if there is a high blood flow, whereas temperature change is great when flow is reduced. 3 cardiac output measurements performed in rapid succession are averaged to provide a more reliable result. In this, a change greater than 13% indicates a clinically significant change in cardiac output. If a single injection is used to determine cardiac output, a difference between a sequential cardiac output measurement of 22% is required to suggest a clinical significant change. The factors which influences the accuracy of thermodilation cardiac output measurements are intracardiac shunts, tricuspid or pulmonary valve regurgitation, inadequate delivery of thermal indicator, that is central venous injection site within the catheter introducer sheath, or warming of the eyes. The pulmonary artery blood temperature fluctuation following the cardiopulmonary bypass, rapid intravenous fluid administration, respiratory. Let's see intracardiac shunts. In thermodilation technique, the cardiac output is measured by the right ventricular output. In intracardiac shunt, right and left ventricular output will not be equal, so it will affect the accuracy. Tricuspid and pulmonary valve regurgitation. In this condition, the recirculation of indicator across the incomplete.
Vandana,
Yes, ma'am.
just
Yes,
wait,
ma'am.
Vandana.
Yes, ma'am.
How the intracardiac
Yes,
shunt will disturb this thermodilation method of this cardiac output monitoring?
Ma'am, in
Left
thermodilation,
to
we
right
only.
and yeah.
Yes, ma'am. If there is right to left shunt, then the cardiac output which measure by thermodilation will be underestimated. If there is underestimated. If there is a right to left shunt, then the cardiac output which we measured is be overestimated, but actually the cardiac output will be less. But in case of left to right shunt, the cardiac output we measured will be underestimated, but the blood will be more.
Yeah, actually in left to right shunt, क्या होगा left to right shunt में there will be recirculation of your inject.
Indicate.
Okay, and in right to left shunt there will this inject will be bypass the thermistor. So
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
okay,
So,
so
yes, ma'am.
it will be not accurate.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay, continue.
Yes, ma'am. The tricuspid and pulmonary valve regurgitation. In this condition, the recirculation of the indicator across the incompetent wall occurs, although minor degree of valvular regurgitation have little effect on thermodilation cardiac output monitoring. These values are unreliable with more severe valvular regurgitation, either underestimated or overestimated depending on the severity of valvular regurgitation and the magnitude of cardiac output. Pulmonary artery blood temperature fluctuation. Following cardiopulmonary bypass, the pulmonary artery temperature falls initially. It is due to redistribution of heat from the warm vessels and highly perfused tissue to less perfused area. Hence, measurements made in the minutes following bypass are notoriously unreliable, most often leading to marked underestimation of the true cardiac output. Respiratory cycle influences. In patients receiving positive pressure mechanical ventilation, RV stroke varies as much as 50% during the respiratory cycle. But when the bolus injections are given, which are synchronized to the same phase of respiratory cycle, an accurate measurement of average cardiac output is achieved more reliably by making the multiple injections during the different phases of respiratory cycle and averaging the results. Let's talk about the continuous thermodilation cardiac output monitoring. In this, a small quantities of heat are released from the 10 cm thermal filament incorporated to RV portion of PAC, approximately 15 to 25 cm from the catheter tip. The resulting thermal signal is measured by thermistor at the tip of the catheter in the pulmonary artery. The heating cycled on and off in a pseudo-random binary sequence. The cardiac output is derived from cross-relation of the measured pulmonary artery temperature with non-sequence of heat filament activation. The cardiac output is updated every 30 to 60 seconds and represents the average value for the cardiac output measured over previous 30 seconds. This is the PAC catheter for the continuous cardiac output, in which 3 ports extra will be there, one for thermal coil connector, one more is for optical connector, and the connect to the thermistor connector. The 10 cent this is a thermal coil which is present in the RV portion of the PAC and which is about 10 centimeters and which is 15 centimeters to 25 centimeters from the tip of this. This will produce the heat here and the temperature changes will be measured here. The pattern of the producing of the heat is pseudo random binary type, in which 2 cycles will take it as input and the temperature changes due to this input is measured as output. By correlating these two, we'll get a temperature. By using this curve, we'll measure the cardiac output. The advantages of continuous thermodilation cardiac output monitoring is in positive pressure ventilation patient, reproducibility and precision of cardiac output is better using this technique compared to single bolus thermodilation cardiac output monitoring. Repeated need of bolus injections are not required, hence it decreases the nursing workload and potential risk of fluid overload or infection. Disadvantages are COC monitor have inherited 5 to 15 minutes delay in responding to abrupt changes in cardiac output, and the magnitude of this delay depend on type of physiological perturbations like temperature, blood flow, etc., as well as COC computer monitor algorithm. Even the static mode, which is used in direct arterial pressures and mixed venous oximeter also, there is delay in acute changes in cardiac output are still detected more slowly by the COC monitoring. The COC computer and catheter requires a significant amount of time to warm up and may work poorly in environment where there is a greater thermal noises such as cardiac operating room. Use of pneumatic compression device may introduce artifacts that appear as a large variation in COC values in otherwise stable patient. And COC PAC catheter are more expensive than the standard PACs. Transpulmonary thermodilation cardiac output. In this, the ice-cold saline is injected into central venous line, while the change in the temperature is measured in large peripheral arteries like femoral, axillary, brachial artery, while a special arterial catheter equipped with thermistor. So in this, when we inject the bolus cold saline here, it will crosses the right heart, lungs, and the left heart, hence breathing cycle independent. And indicator is detected in central artery, so it is not the PSC requirement is not there, so it's not that much invasive. Precise cardiac output measurement is based on the Stewart-Hamilton logarithm, and the passage to the heart lungs allow determination of the preload volumes and lung water. This is the curve obtained by the transpulmonary thermodynamic curve. As you can see, the pulmonary thermodilution curve was here, which is few seconds earlier than the transcardiac pulmonary thermodynamic curve. From transpulmonary cardiopulmonary curve, we will measure the two things, that is mean transient time, which is from the starting to up to 50% of the curve, and exponential decay time. Using this, we can calculate the intrathoracic thermal value. That is, intrathoracic thermal value is the total volume of blood inside the thoracic cavity, which is calculated by cardiac output into mean transient time. And the pulmonary thoracic volume is calculated by exponential decay time into cardiac output. And global end diastolic volume is nothing but the end diastolic volume, which is present in the all chambers of the heart at the end diastolic time.
So this is important. So based on this, we can calculate the volume which is there inside the pulmonary area, and we can calculate the extravascular lung volume.
Yes, sir.
Can you explain on the graph
In
how
the
they
graph,
calculating? Yeah.
yes, sir. The extra volume lung water is nothing but the total intrathoracic blood thermal volume minus the pulmonary blood volume. This is the extrathoracic volume. So we minus this with this, such that you will get this.
Previous slide. Show previous slide.
This one, sir.
No, previous. Yes. Can you tell us on this graph how are we calculating?
Extra lung.
Yes. No, intrathoracic thermal value and pulmonary thermal value.
Okay, sir. The intrathoracic thermal value is calculated by using cardiac output, that is into mean transient thermal transient time, and the pulmonary thoracic volume is calculated by cardiac output into exponential decay time.
Okay.
The extra vascular lung water, which indicates mainly the fluid status, so it measures the pulmonary edema and can be used to guide the fluid therapy in patients with acute lung injuries or sepsis. An increase in extravascular lung water indicates fluid overload, and an extravascular lung water indicates less than 10 ml per kg is the usually normative.
Okay.
The global end diastolic volume and intrathoracic blood volume, these indices will measure cardiac preload better than the traditional measurements such as CVP and pulmonary arterial wedge pressure. However, it appears that these indices still cannot predict cardiac output response in the fluid flow. The global end diastolic volume is measured by intrathoracic thermal volume minus pulmonary thermal volume. The global end diastolic normal value is 640 to 800 ml per meter square. The intrathoracic bed volume is nothing but global end diastolic volume into 1.25. Cardiac function index, it is calculated using cardiac output and intrathoracic blood volume. In patients without RV failure, it has been shown to correlate with LV ejection fraction and its response to inotropic therapy. Advantages are, it's as transpulmonary thermodynamic measures lasts over several respiratory cycles and thereby obviates the respiratory efforts on stroke volume and measured cardiac output. The less invasive than the PSC and avoid complications like PA rupture, pulmonary embolisms, etc. Lithium dilution cardiac output monitoring. It is an accurate technique compared with the standard thermodilution technique. It is also a variant of indicator dilution technique.
Vandana, what are the disadvantages of thermodilution technique? You mentioned the disadvantages or drawbacks.
Ma'am, total the standard one, ma'am. Ma'am, standard one, First of all, it's an invasive technique, ma'am. So there will be
Yes.
PAC is required. So there will be complications like hemorrhage, pulmonary artery rupture, arterial, etc. Second, it cannot be done in cases like intercardiac shunt, if intercardiac shunts are present, or transpulmonary regurgitation, wall regurgitations, etc. all will be present. And the temperature between the indicator and also the temperature of the blood will be minimum 10 degrees Celsius difference must be there. Otherwise, we will not get accurate measurements.
So
So what
observer
are the
variation can also
indications?
be there.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
What are
Yes,
the
sir.
indications of PA catheter then? Which cases you use?
PA कहते हैं.
Are
Ma'am,
we using it these days? There are very limited indications these days, no?
yes,
Because
ma'am.
of its invasive
Mainly
technique
it is
use.
restricted. Yes, ma'am. Mainly it is restricted to cardiac surgery and transplant, liver transplant and renal transplant surgeries.
You're doing it in all cardiac surgeries. You've done your cardiac posting, your batch.
No, ma'am.
So when indications of PA catheter are important, and these days it is being used in very limited way because of its invasiveness. And but from exam point of view, this is a very important topic. What is indications of PA catheterization, the structure of the PA catheter, and the principles, thermodilution principle, and the drawbacks of the technique. All this is very important from exam point of view. There are very limited indications, and when you do your cardiac posting, you must learn how to use this PA catheter and how to measure cardiac output using this. Okay, but these days it is very limitedly used. Even in cardiac surgery, the use is limited these days. Okay.
Okay. Shall I continue?
Yeah, continue.
In this intravenous bolus injection of small dose of lithium chloride, an ion selective electrode attached to the peripheral arterial catheter measures the lithium dilution curve from which cardiac output is derived. The we inject from the central line, but for lithium we can use the peripheral line also. And from the arterial line there will be thermistor which measures the lithium concentration and will give the curve. By this curve we measure the cardiac output. The lithium indicator can be injected through a peripheral intravenous catheter with a similar measurement accuracy, thus eliminating the need for central venous line. This technique can also be used in children. Disadvantages are lithium dilution cannot be used in patients who are taking lithium or those who have just received non-depolarizing neuromuscular blockers, since the latter also alter the lithium sensor electrode measurements. Lithium should not be administered to patients in the first trimester of pregnancy because of fetal anomalies. Dye dilution method. In this, indocyanine green dye is injected through the central venous catheter. Its appearance in the systemic arterial circulation can be measured by analyzing arterial sample with appropriate detector, that is densometer for indocyanine green. The area under the resulting dye indicator is related to cardiac output, but dye dilution technique, however, introduces the problems of indicator recirculation, repeated arterial blood sampling, and background tracer buildups. Esophageal Doppler cardiac output monitoring. In this technique, a special esophageal Doppler probe has been developed that allows continuous monitoring of cardiac output by measuring the Doppler shift of the interrogated blood flow in the descending thoracic aorta. That is, the blood in the aorta is in a relative motion compared with the Doppler probe in the esophagus. As the red blood cells travel, they reflect a frequency shift. Depending upon the both direction and velocity of their movement, when blood flow towards the transmitter, it's reflected the frequency is higher than that which was transmitted by the probe. When blood cells move away from the transmitter, the frequency is lower than that which initially sent by the probe. The Doppler probe is inserted into esophagus to the depth of approximately 35 centimeters from the incisor teeth and is adjusted to optimize the audible Doppler probe sound from the descending aorta. It lies in a close proximity and runs essentially parallel to esophagus at this location. As you can see, the probe is here, which will be parallel to descending aorta. and which, these are the receiver crystals and transfer crystals, and by this digital spectral wave is formed. The current device provide a clear visual display of spectral Doppler waveform and also calculate the velocity of flow in the iota. By using the Doppler equation, we can calculate the velocity blood flow in the iota. The velocity blood flow is equal to frequency change divided by cosine of the angle incidence between the Doppler beam and blood flow into speed of sound divided by speed. For Doppler to provide a real level estimate of velocity, the angle of incidence should be as close to as 0. Since the cosine of 0 is 1, as the angle approaches the 90 degree, the Doppler measure is unreliable, and as the cosine of 90 is 0. As the velocity of cells in the aorta travels at different speed over a cardiac cycle, the machine obtains a measure all of the velocities of a cell moving over time. Mathematically integrate the velocity represents the distance that blood travels. Next, using the normograms, the monitor approximates the area of descending aorta. The monitor thus calculate both distance of the blood travels as well as the area. The area and the length is nothing but the volume. Consequently, the stroke volume of the blood in descending aorta is calculated. Knowing the heart rate allows the calculation of portion of cardiac output flowing through the descending thoracic aorta, which is approximately 70% of total cardiac output. Correcting for this, 30% allows the monitor to estimate the patient's total cardiac output. It also displays additional hemodynamic variables such including peak blood flow velocity, flow acceleration, heart rate corrected flow time. These additional measures provide useful information about LV preload, fluid responsiveness, contractility, and systemic vascular resistance. Respiratory variability of aortic blood flow velocity can be used to predict cardiac output response to fluid bolus. The preload, increase in preload will cause an increase in flow time, with the systolic flow time corrected for the heart rate, and it also increases the stroke distance, which is nothing but represents the stroke volume. And decreasing the preload decreases the flow time and stroke distance. After load increases, the flow time will be decreased and stroke distance also will decrease, and peak velocity which must be achieved that also will decrease. Decrease in afterload increases the flow time, stroke distance, and peak velocity. Contractility increases the stroke distance and it also increases the peak velocity. Decrease in contractility will decrease the peak velocity. In this monitoring, it is mainly focusing on optimizing the stroke volume than the total cardiac output. Indeed, in critically ill patient, the complications may be better predicted by low stroke volume than by the low cardiac output. The hemodynamic optimization guided by maximum esophageal Doppler measured stroke volume in moderate risk surgical patients found reduced in perioperative morbidity and shortens the hospital stay. Advantages: its ease of use, minimal invasiveness, inherent safety, limited experience is needed for clinical success as of 10 to 12 cases for accurate application of this technique. The Doppler cardiac output values correlated well with thermodilation measurements and showed minimal overall bias and good tracking of directional change in thermodilation cardiac output with low intra and inter-observation measurement variability. Disadvantages: this monitor method interrogates blood flow in the descending thoracic aorta and therefore only measure the fraction of total cardiac output. To report total cardiac output, either the esophageal Doppler measurement must be calibrated by some alternative methods or an empirically determined correction constant of 1.4 is used. This constant is accurate for most patients but not applied to universally, especially in presence of conditions that redistribute the blood flow such as pregnancy, aortic cross-clamping, and following cardiopulmonary bypass. The technique is likely to be inaccurate in presence of aortic wall stenosis or regurgitation or in patients with thoracic aortic diseases. It is easily applied in non-tracheally intubated, non-sedated patient, and it cannot be used in individuals with esophageal pathologies like varices, cancer, etc. The acoustic window needed to acquire the Doppler signal may not be adequate in some individuals. Bioimpedance and bioreactance cardiac output monitoring. It is based on change in electrical impedance of thoracic cavity or the whole body occurring with ejection of blood during cardiac systole. As the blood has significant lower electric resistance compared with the tissue, change in impedance to electric flow reflects a change in blood volume, and this can be used to calculate the stroke volume. For bioimpedance measurement, disposable electrodes are applied to the skin surface along the sides of the neck and lateral aspect of the coastal margin, the thoracic bioimpedance, to the four limbs in case of whole body bioimpedance. A high frequency, low amplitude electric current is applied and voltage change is measured. Patient height, weight, gender are used to calculate the volume of thoracic cavity. The bioimpedance cardiac output is computed for each cardiac cycle and continuously displayed as an average value over several heartbeats. Disadvantages is, although bioimpedance method is accurate in healthy volunteers, its reliability deteriorates in surgically and critically ill patients. Its accuracy also will be deteriorates in arrhythmia patients and obesity patients. Bioreactance. It measures the amplitude change of received signal, also its phase shift compared to the applied electrical signals. It utilizes 4 dual electrode patches, placed 2 on each side of the body. Compared to the standard bioimpedance method, the bioreactance method shows somewhat better agreement with the traditional cardiac output calculations. It is used to predict the fluid responses when using the passive leg raising test in patients after cardiac surgery, evaluating the cardiac output changes during the exercise stress testing. Partial carbon dioxide rebreathing cardiac output monitoring. In this method, the change in the end tidal carbon dioxide in response to rebreathing maneuvers are used to calculate the cardiac output, the differential version of the Fick equation for carbon dioxide. At a steady state, the amount of carbon dioxide entering the lung via the pulmonary artery is proportional to cardiac output and equals to the amount exiting the lung via expiration and pulmonary vein. It is mainly used in the neonatal ICU. There is 3-minute cycle in this. First for 60 seconds, there will be rebreathing valve will be off, and the baseline is levels are taken. That is carbon dioxide consumption, which will be in this baseline, and the partial carbon dioxide and EtCO2. And rebreathing valve is open for the 50 seconds. In this time, the consumption of the carbon dioxide will be reduced, but PaCO2 and EtCO2 will be elevated. And for the last 70 seconds, rebreathing valve will be off, in which again the consumption carbon dioxide will be becoming the baseline and EtCO2 will decrease. This is the equation which we use for calculation of cardiac output. Cardiac output is equal to carbon dioxide consumption divided by its venous content minus arterial content. Advantages is that it is non-invasive. It can be performed every few minutes, and the brief episodes of breathing poses no substantial risk to most patients. With time, end tidal carbon dioxide measurement increases by less than 3 mm of Hg. But disadvantage is this technique requires tracheal intubation for precise measurement of exhaled gas. Changing pattern of ventilation may have unpredictable influence on the measurement. Partial carbon dioxide rebreathing method measures pulmonary capillary blood flow as an indicator of total cardiac output, and thus requires correction for pulmonary shunt. The clinical role for this technique is mainly focused on short-term intraoperative applications or mechanically ventilated post-operative patients. Due to mandatory increase in arterial CO2, the technique is relatively contraindicated in patients with increased intracranial pressure. The pulse counter cardiac output monitoring. In this method, the continuous measurement of cardiac output derived from the analysis of arterial pulse pressure waveforms. It determines the stroke volume from computerized analysis of area under the arterial pressure waveforms recorded from the arterial catheter or even a non-invasive figure, a blood pressure wave. The pulse counter cardiac output method provides an acceptable level of accuracy with a bias of less than 0.5 liters per minute compared to the thermodynamic cardiac output. Pulse counter analysis. The stroke volume is reflected by the area under the systolic part of the pressure curve of the one input. The cardiac output is calculated by stroke volume into heart rate. Advantages: it's a non-invasive. Continuous beat to beat cardiac output monitoring can be done. The change in stroke volume from beat to beat in response to tidal ventilation can be measured to evaluate volume status in ventilated patient. Disadvantages. The baseline calibration with a known cardiac output is required to account for individual difference in vascular resistance, impedance, and wave frequency. Recalibration is required every 8 to 12 hours to account for change in vascular characteristics over time. Use of vasopressor might affect the accuracy of pulse control method. This need for external calibration might require the use of more invasive techniques. A reasonably well-defined arterial pressure waveform, which is discriminal dichotic notch, is required for accurate identification of systole and diastole, a condition that might not exist under severe tachycardia or dysarrhythmia or very low output states. For meaningful use of beat to beat variation in stroke volume as well as stroke pressure or pressure variation, the patient need to be controlled mechanical ventilation with a tidal volume of at least 8 ml per kg body weight and to be in a regular cardiac rhythm. Uses the stroke volume variation above 10% has been shown to be useful predictor of fluid responsiveness. The goal-directed therapy based on either maximizing pulse control-derived cardiac output or minimizing SSP result in improved perioperative outcomes. Track. This is a pulse control device requiring only an arterial line, femoral or radial. It doesn't require an external calibration. It requires the patient information like age, sex, height, weight in order to estimate the physiological property of the patient arterial system. PICO. This is two methods are combined in this, that is transpulmonary thermodilation technique and pulse control analysis. The PICO system calculates systole volume variation and pulse pressure variation through pulse control analysis, both of which can be used to determine the fluid responsiveness. Both stroke volume and pulse pressure are decreased during the positive pressure ventilation. By using transpulmonary thermodilation, we can measure volumetric readouts like global and diastolic volume, cardiac function index, and lung water. By using the pulse control analysis, there will be continuous cardiac monitoring, and after load systemic vascular resistance, stroke volume, volume responsiveness by using the SVV and pulse pressure variation, we can measure. Pulse pressure variation. The pulse pressure variation is the change in the pulse pressure that occurs throughout the respiratory cycle in a patient supported by positive pressure ventilation. This can be calculated by the pulse pressure variation, which will be maximum during inspiration, minus the pulse pressure variation minimum during expiration divided by pulse pressure mean into 100. As volume is administered, pulse pressure variation decreases. Variation is greater than 12 to 13% is suggestive of fluid responsiveness. As you can see, when PP is 25% after giving the fluid therapy, the PV will decreases to 7%. Stroke volume variation and pulse volume variation also determine if hypotension is respond to fluid therapy. Like pulse volume variation, more than 13% or 17% indicates that the patient is fluid responders. The same way, the patients with who are in this T are good response of fluid therapy than the patients which are present in above this.
Vanna, can you tell me why stroke volume variation is occurring?
So, during inspiration, there will be positive pressure in the thoracic cavity, which result in decreased venous return. There will be decreased venous return. So, stroke volume will decrease during the inspiration, and in case of expiration, there will be increased venous return, which result in increase in the stroke volumes.
Okay. So in patient who has got a low volume, they will have more variation as compared to a patient who is U volumic.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Goal-directed fluid therapy. First, understand why fluid volume is important. If we give less fluid to the patient, there will be consequences like hypoperfusion, hypotension, renal failure, and tachycardia, etc. If we give more fluid, there will be ileus post-operative nausea, vomiting, pulmonary edema, pulmonary dysfunction, etc. So the fluid which we give to the patient must be in adequate quantity to prevent both of the complications. The goal-directed therapy is based on measuring key physiological variables related to cardiac output or global oxygen delivery and administrating the fluids and the possible inotrope vasopressors, vasodilators, and RBCs to improve the tissue perfusion and clinical outcome. GDT is both used in perioperative and critically case.
So this graph is
Let's
very important.
understand the
Yeah, go on.
the pathophysiology of high-risk surgeries and the rationale for goal-directed therapy. Major surgery causes systematic inflammatory response, which result in increased oxygen demand in tissue. The high-risk patients have less ability to increase cardiac output and extraction of oxygen from the blood in order to meet increased demand, which result in tissue hypoxia, which result in endothelial activation, increased vascular permeability, cytokine release, vasoconstriction, activation of leukocytes, and complement cascade, which result in multiple organ dysfunction. So, in case of goal-directed fluid therapy, modify the hemodynamic parameters so that higher than the normal amount of oxygen are delivered to the tissue such that the increased demand met and prevents the sequelae of tissue hypoxia. These are the target values, which we called as supranormal survival values because it is more than the normal indices which will be present in the normal patients. The cardiac index which we must maintain must be more than 4.5 liters minute per meter square. Oxygen delivery index must be maintained more than 600 ml per minute per meter square, and oxygen consumption index must be more than 170 ml per minute per meter square, such that the oxygen is delivered to the tissue and oxygen demand is met. The tools to measure the physiological targets are pulmonary artery tool used in and oxygen delivery index, but now it is not used because of catheter associated morbidity reduced less invasive tools. It is typically restricted to cardiac, major liver, and transplant surgeries. Esophageal Doppler monitoring, already we saw. This device uses the transesophageal ultrasound measure for the descending aortic blood velocity and integrate this with estimated aortic cross-sectional area to derive stroke volume. The FTC, nothing but the systolic time corrected by heart rate, may be reduced by increasing the systemic vascular resistance or by reducing the stroke volume or both. This to identify the cause of FTC reduced, we must calculate the CVP and mean arterial pressure. So if there is an increase in CVP and mean arterial pressure, then it is due to the excessive afterload. If it is CVP and mean arterial pressure is less, then the low FTC is due to inadequate preload. Arterial pressure waveform analysis. This monitor analyzes the invasive arterial blood or continuous non-invasive blood flow from the fingertip or plethysmoric trace. An estimate of stroke volume and therefore cardiac output index based on principle that pulse pressure is proportional to stroke volume when arterial compliance is constant. Interpatient variation in arterial compliance may be accounted by regular calibration. The SVV, a predictor fluid response based on the systolic pressure variation with intermittent pulse volume, can be measured. Other tools, lactate. A reduction in the elevated blood lactate concentration is used clinically as a marker of successful resuscitation. Oxygen extraction and central venous saturation. Inadequate oxygen delivery may be signaled by increased oxygen extraction and the resulting mixed central venous oxygen desaturation. The low central venous saturation is associated with poor outcomes after high-risk surgeries. Thoracic bioimpedance, relatedly underexplored in perioperative interventional trials. CVP readings are clearly predictive of intravascular blood volumes because it is affected by the many factors. And echocardiogram, this advanced technique is used for guiding fluid therapy and reading information on cardiac performance and filling, but requires the operative expertise and transitional approach in intraoperative settings. Approach. A typical GDT is rapidly administration of 250 ml bolus of the colloid or crystalloid, aiming to increase the stroke volume by 10% or more each time. This process is continued until there is no further rise in stroke volume, at which point ventricular filling is taken to be flatter part of the Starling's curve. Let's see how we will do it esophageal Doppler. We must monitor the flow time and the stroke volume. If the flow time is less than 350 milliseconds, then we must give the colloid challenge, that is for first bolus 7 ml per kg if low FTC or 3 ml kg subsequent bolus. If FTC is less than 350 still, again we must continue the colloid challenge. So we must give the colloid challenge until the stroke volume is increased or FTC increases. If FTC increases more than 400 milliseconds, then you must again monitor the FTC SVC. If FTC again decreases or stroke volume decreases more than 10%, again we must start the fluid colloid challenge. If FTC increase is not there and SV increase more than 10% since previous bolus or measurement, then again we must give the colloid challenge. As conclusion is that we must give the colloid challenge until the stroke volume increase will be more than 10%, or there will be flattering in the Frank-Stallings curve. Advantages of this: reduction in post-operative morbidity and hospital stay, reduction in post-operative renal impairment, respiratory failure, and post-operative wound infection. Thank you.
Okay. So Ananya, why do we want to go for goal-directed therapy? Ananya?
Ananya is also absent.
Next, Anjusha.
They've logged in and disappeared.
Yes, ma'am. Hello, ma'am.
Anjusha, why do we want to go for goal-directed?
Hello.
Let one speak.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Go on.
Hello, sir.
Tell me why do we want to go for goal-directed therapy?
सर गोल डायरेक्टेड थेरेपी में हम एक करना चाहते हैं कि आफ्टर द सर्जरी इज बीन डन जो हमारा कितना फ्लूइड चैलेंज हमने दे दिया पेशेंट को दैट इज एडिक्वेट है कि नहीं, मतलब कितना ऑक्सीजन आफ्टर द सर्जरी एंड ऑल पेशेंट का ऑक्सीजन ड्यू टू द इन्फ्लेमेशन और इन्फ्लेमेशन प्रोसेस और ऑक्सीजन डिमांड ऑलरेडी कम हो जाता है एंड बिकॉज ऑफ फ्लूइड चैलेंज जो देर है इसकी वजह से एडिक्वेट ऑक्सीजनेशन इज गिवन टू द टिश्यूज एंड ऑल.
Okay, Vandana, can you show me that previous slide which I was talking about?
Yes.
Who has answered? Anjusha has answered or Ananya?
Okay. Okay, Ananya, if you're there. Ananya, are you there?
Ananya and Amir are being marked absent today.
Hello. Yes, sir.
So tell me, why do we want to keep the patient in the center of this graph? What will happen if we overload the patient or we underload the patient?
Sir, if we overload or underload the patient, then we won't. So then
You can see the
goal.
graph and tell us.
These are two different situations. Underload is one situation, overload is second situation. Please explain both.
Hello.
Can anyone explain the graph?
Hello.
Yes. Hello. Can anyone explain this graph? Yes.
Sir, if we overload the patient, then if when we'll measure the stroke volume, it will show as an increased rather than the normal value.
Can anyone explain? Anyone else? Anyone?
Any volunteer?
Hello.
Yeah, who is this?
This is Preeti.
Okay, tell us why do we want to keep the patient in the center of the
So
graph?
we want to give, to keep the patient in the center of the graph, because after the major surgeries, as we discussed, that the oxygen demand is increased and patients have lesser ability to increase the cardiac output. So we want to give a particular amount of fluid to the patient so that if we underload the patient can go in hypoxia,
Okay.
the
Hypoxia
hypovolemia
because
and
of
tachycardia.
hypoperfusion.
Sir, yes, the
Yes.
hypoperfusion can lead to hypoxia. And if we overload the patients, so then these
Okay.
patients can experience post-op nausea, vomiting, and
So
pulmonary
what will happen to
edema
the
and
lungs? What will happen to the lungs? What will happen to the intestine? For example, if it is a major abdominal surgery, what will happen if we overload the patient? So if there is overloading, it can cause pulmonary
Yes.
complication. There may be extravascular fluid inside the interstitial space, and it can cause respiratory compromise. If it is an abdominal surgery, it can cause so it can cause fluid edema inside the gut, and the functioning of the gut will be hampered. So it can be more detrimental as compared to hypoperfusion. So that is why we want to go for goal directed therapy and want to keep the patient in the center or euvolemic, just so that he is not affected by both overloading and underloading. Okay.
Thank you.
So even though there are controversies regarding goal directed therapy, but definitely it will help in reducing the length of stay of the patient, and it will help in improving the outcome of the patient. Okay. So you have to know all these goal directed therapies. What are the indicators of goal directed therapy? So there is a table which is there, I think, in your Miller also. You can, and there is an article also. You can go through that goal directed therapy. Why do we want to go for a goal directed therapy, and what are the indices? Okay. And secondly, this is regarding this topic, cardiac output can come as a long question in your exam, and it is a very important topic. So there can be question about PAC, about fixed principle, about and how to derive from partial rebreathing mechanism, how to derive the cardiac output. Okay, there can be question on these topics as well. How to use a PAC, pulmonary artery catheter, what are the advantages and disadvantages, and what are the different, it can come as a long question also. Okay, anything else you want to ask? Well, everyone is too exhausted with the topic. Any questions?
Anyone have any doubt? Please ask. I think they know everything.
So we'll assess that in the exam.
Okay.
It's a difficult
Yeah.
topic, but you have to go through Miller once and understand this topic. Okay, even if you have questions later on, you can come to me and you can ask me personally, or you can email me. Okay, you can take the attendance. How do you take the attendance?
Uh, it's taken actually. हो गया
Okay,
है.
okay,
हाँ.
okay. Thank
ठीक
you,
है.
Vandana. Okay,
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Abhishek.
thank you.
Yeah, we can leave.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.